Strider, your host here at Author in the Headlights. And today, as you may not know, we have Denise Frisino, and she writes historical fiction. So not only do we want to go about her books, but as part of our policy here at Author in the Headlights, we want to know the story behind the story and what it takes to write. For you authors that are or want to be, this is your way to hear it. And so, good morning, Denise.
Good morning. Now, I like being called Dennis because that's who I was named after, my great-grandfather, Dennis. So there you have it.
I'm also just tongue-tied, twisted, and that's how I am. So I'm glad
Don't
you're
worry
here with
about
us.
it.
Thank you so much for taking your time to be with us here at Author in the Headlights. By the way, Author in the Headlights is sponsored by Durham and Publishing, and they're the ones that also have your books as a guest author on their page, and people can see them there. But now back to you. You chose historical fiction, and you've got both a series and a single in that genre. How did you choose that?
You know, a lot of times with a writer, you don't choose, it chooses you. And that's precisely what happened with me. I was working up at Roach Harbor in San Juan Islands in the Pacific Northwest. And a friend of mine told me that his grandmother had been involved in prohibition and rum running from Canada through the San Juans to the Seattle area. And I said, "Oh, honey, you're drunk. I'm not serving you any more drinks. Sit down." And
Rum-running, yeah.
oh, yeah, rum running. And it turns out to be the truth. And I came home and I told my father this. He said, "Write the book, Deese." So this was pre-computer. So I started reading books on prohibition. This book just came flying out of me after all of my research that I had done. I interviewed people in person, which is one of the things that I love to do for all of my historical fictions. And I'd read a lot of books and the story just came out. But when I was up there researching, now this is the first book I'm talking about, Whiskey Cove.
Whiskey Cove.
So this is the one that's set up in the San Juans about prohibition. And when I was researching this one, this gentleman told me the story of a Japanese spy ring along the West Coast. And he told me that there had been a young woman at the University of Washington, and she was fluent in Japanese, but she was Caucasian. So the FBI found out about her and figured out how to use her talents by dressing her like a hooker and putting her in the bars of San Francisco to listen to the conversations to figure out where the spy ring actually operated from Alaska to Mexico. I took that storyline, and this is 5 years of research for Orchids of War. And that's how it found me. I didn't find it. It came and landed in my lap. So then this is the first of the series, 5 years. And then this is the second one, Storms from a Clear Sky, which is right 5 minutes later, it starts. And I'm working on the third one right now.
I thought that was going to be a trilogy. There's 2 so far, but you've got more coming.
I've got more coming, and I was lucky enough to have the second one win the Hemingway 20th Century Wartime Fiction.
That's part of the CIBA Awards.
That was very exciting. But what I did for research, like I said, interviewing is very important. In the last 11 years, I have interviewed over 56 World War II veterans. And then what I do is I incorporate what they told me into my storyline. Book 1 is set in Seattle, San Francisco, and Hawaii, but book 2 goes into both theaters and it ends in 1943. And I'm right now in the third book, just about at D-Day. I just wrote about D-Day because I interviewed a remarkable man about D-Day. So see, what I do is he told me what happened to him. So I've incorporated what through my characters, what happened to Joe.
That's cool. Now, really I personally have an interest in it because my father was at Pearl Harbor the day it was bombed on shipboard, and as was his brother on another ship. And neither of them knew it. They didn't know it till they sent letters to their mother because she would worry, of course, and found out they were both on shipboard in the harbor at the time of the bombing. And in fact, on my wall in my office, I have a photo from one of the Japanese attack planes out the window showing my dad's ship down below that's being bombed. Now that was actually given me by a friend whose brother was actually in the intelligence service and took that photo, which has never been published, but I have a copy of it on my wall now. So to me, the whole issue of Pacific fighting in World War II is kind of personal. It's kind of neat.
My father was in the service already, and he was just about to get out
Yeah, good
when
timing.
good timing. And he said he walked into the room and everyone was around the radio, and he said, "Oh, this can't be good," because it was anticipated that at some point in time we were
Yeah.
going to join the fray. And sure enough, somebody looked up at him and said, "They just bombed Pearl Harbor." And Dad asked, where's Pearl Harbor? Unless you had a family member there or sent cookies at Thanksgiving, like some churches did, none of them knew where Pearl Harbor was prior to the attack.
True. And it was just one of the facilities there in Hawaii. One thing I did want to ask was, when you're doing this kind of research, how important is it to you and or the reader to have this accurate versus just a novel of the time?
Oh, there is no fooling anyone about World War II. There's too many people like yourself and myself who have read way too much to start and pull the wool over somebody's eyes and not make it accurate. And because of the subject matter, I wanted to be sure I had my ducks in a row, because I haven't found anyone who's really broached the subject of the Japanese spy ring that existed. And yes, this is historical fiction, but there is so much truth in it that
But
it's
it will
hard to
be as
say.
accurate as you can get that. And that truly is important.
Oh,
It's not
I think
just a good
so.
story, because now in my stories, in my writing, which is young adult action, adventure fiction, I actually create my own world building. So I develop what I want. Do I take historical elements to it? Of course, because the closer you can get to things, the more enjoyable it is to people, because they get a feel of what that is.
And
But
it's
yours has to be,
recognizable.
it is,
Mhm.
but you choose to make it accurate.
Absolutely. I mean, there, of course, I've woven into the story some things that didn't happen, because it is fiction. But as far as the major time periods and the major elements of the war, I've spent 11 years so far researching. I feel it's my duty, after having, sat with these men and women, to share and not to let anyone forget all that they experienced for us and the hardships that they went through. There were still so many sacrifices being made, and
And
that's
we're
what I'm
even
trying to.
termed the greatest generation, was a title that we've given to that era and those people.
For a very good reason.
They were, and they did, and they fought for our freedoms and our rights. And so
And
that's important. That
and
is we as Americans. And yes, this may be heard by people outside, but to recognize what we did do, and for the world as well as ourselves, to take a wide picture. I do find that we tend to have such a tiny sliver of history that we know and feel and believe. And the more data we can have is the bigger picture we can have, an understanding of everything, of how it
well, I
all
think
goes together.
one of the things I try to do in this too is to present history in a different fashion. Most of the reviewers that I've had have said, "My gosh, the amount of research you have done." It's set in the 40s, so I use words from the 40s, and I'm not afraid to do that. I did theater most of my life, and you can't make this soft. It
No,
was not a
because
soft time.
I grew up in the 50s, and the terminology, the phrases, the tones of things was different. And if you're going to write about something in an era, you can't really do that and put it in today's verbiage,
Absolutely not.
because
You
it's
can't.
not, it just doesn't fit. It's not that we wanted to be a different way then, it's how it was stated and words were used. And does it make it right or wrong? It just was different. If you're going to be accurate, you have to tell it that way. And people have to understand different eras have different ways of viewing things, right or wrong.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the responsibility of a good author, is to not to try to please everyone.
And it's also true that, yes, the winners do create history the way it's known, and there had to be more. But that's part of also what you as a historical fiction writer can correct some of those thoughts, maybe by bringing out actual what happened versus what the way we may have heard it. So I think that's also important, something it can actually achieve. Oh, I didn't know that. Is that makes sense of how things work. So I think that awareness of history, even in a fiction story, is still basically history. as long as you write it that way.
And I think that's the choice the author makes.
I
Is it
agree.
going to
Yes.
be not historical fiction? It's just going to be fiction.
In a
Or is it
historical
going,
setting, that's very different than historical fiction attempting to be
Mhm.
accurate.
I was a teacher and in drama and media, and I really feel like it's very important to continue to teach of how it really did happen and that the spies did exist.
Well, yes, absolutely. And particularly like the West Coast, as we know, because that is where the action was. It went to Hawaii, it went to the Philippines, it went out, to do those things, but the big bases were here. So, of course, that's where someone would be. You do this and you try to be historically accurate. You go through this process. I know that you're going to Hawaii very shortly, and you're
Very
going to be
shortly.
meeting with someone there to discuss this, both with your book, I think, but also others to talk with a historian. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I'm lucky enough to have a book signing on Kauai at Tuck Story. And then on Oahu, I'm meeting with the lovely historian, Thelma Cam, who took me on a tour of the Royal Hawaiian, the Pink Lady. So I have scenes of that one. And now I'm going through the Moana Surf Rider with her, because those were actually the only two hotels in existence on all of Waikiki when the war broke out
Oh,
of their size. Yes.
it sounds like a rough life you have. I've got to
But
get smarter and write about places I can get taken to or look at. And, anyway, go ahead.
I think that, but I think that's an element of the accuracy.
Yes.
I stood above Kaneohe because my character acts out what Captain Dick McNeese told me happened to him, being shot at that morning at Kaneohe. So I stood above it on a December 7th, Sunday morning. I try to do those things. I try to stand to feel the wind, look at the water, look at the moon, see what's really going on, so that I can write about it.
You're an award winner because of your style,
you.
your method, your story, how you put it together. It's not just thoughts, it's actually put together artistically, readable, so that it makes a connection with people. What do you use as a method for writing?
Be careful when you're doing your research and don't go down the rabbit hole so far that you're way over here and your story's way back here.
I've actually heard that where you can
Mhm,
get so deep into your
mhm.
research that you never write. Oh, there's
No,
always more. There's more. I got it more. So you do have to write at some point. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. You have to write. And also know your ending. And the reason for this trip to Hawaii is because I now know the ending. I have to, smooth it out a little bit. There's a couple of things that I really need to look at again to make sure that they're accurate. But let me
Yeah.
tell you, I have people as far away as Australia going, where's book 3?
And it's been a little bit long. So we're waiting. Hello.
Well, as a writer, you have, once the book is out or in print, then you start in. You have to spend a good 9 months to a year selling that book, or don't even
Absolutely.
bother writing a second one because
Absolutely.
you have to get known. So I always allow myself about a year of sales in between
For
books.
that
And
marketing
besides,
of your story. Yes.
right. And also I was still interviewing. And that was more important to me than getting the story out. I knew that there would be time for me to finish the story, but these lovely, incredible men and women are leaving us so quickly right now that I
Yes.
had to step up the game.
You were talking about knowing the end of her story ahead of time. Do you pre-plot your stories or a portion of it? Do you already have that blocked out so you know kind of this is happening, this is happening, or is it true seat of the pants? It just flows.
I'm lucky in the aspect of the war because there's a specific timeline
Yes.
I obviously have to follow. And I've interviewed men and women who were involved in all of these major battles, so I've interviewed people who were at these, so I can take what they told me and have my characters
Yeah.
act those out. So I get that in a timeline, but I also have the other story going on.
Yeah. The people in it that have
Billy.
their own story inside of history story. Yes.
So
Yeah.
I have to incorporate that whole
Fit that
thread,
in within
you
the
know,
history. Yes.
you
Now we're
know,
kind of running out of time here. Real quick one. How long does it take you to produce a book?
got to go through the ropes of a good editor. And I
You
pay for
do.
a lot of money for my art.
Yep.
I love my artist, so it takes time. Once you finished writing the book, now the work begins, because now you've got to have the editors, you have to have the readers, you have to have the art, you have to have all that. That can take months.
It
But
can take longer than that.
There's no given answer, and nobody should beat themselves up over how long it takes them, because that will only impede you from wanting to work. One thing I like to do is when I write, I like to leave at a fun place. In other words, I might start the next scene, and that brings me back. I can't wait to get back to that computer, because I want to get back to that scene and finish it.
That's a good thing to note, because if you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do a better job at it than if you're plodding along, just kind of do your
Right.
500 words for the day. I think we've run out of time today. We may have to have you back one of these days.
That would love it. It would be an honor.
Super. For sure, when the book gets done. Haha. So for today, again, this is Denise Frisino, not Dennis. Hello, Kickstrider. And this is Author in the Headlights. Ta-da! Right there. There it is.
That's right.
And you can find her books also at DurhamandPublishing.com. Check it out there. I'm Strider. This is Author in the Headlights. And until next time, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Sponsored by DurhamandPublishing.com.